today's episode, I am welcoming someone that is very near and dear to my heart. I was trying to think of how we first met. It feels like a lifetimes ago. If that makes sense. And I think I pinpointed who it was, but it was just, it's fascinating when you have people in your life that you can't remember how you met and you're really struggling, but they feel like they've always been there, and that's you. So Chris Dierkes, thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me.
You were introduced to me as a soul interpreter, and being the human package that I am, I was like, say what? Say there's a what out in the world? We get to do what? We get to do that? And our paths crossed in this lifetime there. And you've led many lifetimes. And from my perspective, it has felt like, knowing a bit of your story, it feels like you've lived many lifetimes within this one. As I have, actually, when you think about it. And I think that's something to really think about, like, how many types and people have we been in this one life? So I don't know how I would love for you to share a little bit about yourself and like how you describe the work that you do right now, so people can have a bit of context, because it seems like kind of a very broad thing to say.
Yeah. Well, thanks for having me again. Yeah, I'm trying, now that you brought that up, I'm trying to remember too. I think I have a memory of at least one of the first times we met. I don't know if it was the first, it might have been, but at least early on. So soul interpreter, or soul interpretation maybe is a place to start. And then that brings up the question of what is soul, which is one of the things we're going to get into. But I like saying interpreter or translator, and at least on the front end when I'm working with folks, that's how it kind of looks, like a pretty classic translator type person. And just provisionally, I'll say we could call soul like personal essence. So I kind of translate or try to create a line of communication between an individual's normal sense of themselves and what we might call their deeper or soul or personal essence. And at the beginning, I look a little bit like a translator, translating back and forth.
Absolutely.
But in the long haul, my actual intent is to be more like a voice coach or like a language teacher, in the sense that I want people to be able to do their own translations for themselves. I want them to be able to hear them singing in tune with their soul, if you like that image better, for themselves, and hear themselves when they're in tune and when they're out of tune, and not need a translator, not need someone to point out when in tune or out of tune, but to be able to hear it for themselves. So that's kind of the longer term aim in my work with folks, is I'm interested in making myself obsolete. Really.
Exactly, right?
Yeah.
It's like for a time being, you're like a guide, a facilitator. And just so people have a little bit more specific background, because how does one end up as a soul interpreter? Cole's Notes version of, I see these stepping stones of like, well, then I have this, then I'll let to that.
Yeah.
What was that for you? Just so
yeah. So in my 20s, even starting in my late teens, but certainly by my early 20s, I was a heavy duty spiritual seeker. So I always say I was kind of like enlightenment or bust was my motto.
Your bumper sticker.
My bumper sticker. Yeah, I wore that. And I got to experience, actually, it turned out it was an and, not an or. I got to experience enlightenment and bust.
Right? Oh God, how many people did that just get right in the solar plexus? Absolutely. Go.
It was all the above. Not either or. So what happened in the fallout, or in the bit of the rubble of having experienced what I thought I was aiming for, and then find out that it was a bit more of a cosmic joke than I had anticipated, And at first I didn't have a particularly, it took me some years to learn to like get the joke and laugh. I had a pretty non-humorous response at the beginning. Fair enough.
How many hands are just going up? Me too, that me.
I didn't find it funny at the moment, but
No.
no. But in the kind of demolition that was occurring there was an aspect of me that arose, a voice that I had not been listening to. And in fact, I literally remember the moment it happened. I was sitting in meditation and I heard this kind of whisper voice, if you like, internally. And I literally like opened my eyes and looked out at the door, looked at the door, because I thought, and I had like a little jolt because I literally thought somebody had come in the room and said something to me, and I was completely like a little shook for a moment, and I was like, wait a minute, I'm so disconnected from this aspect of myself that I literally thought somebody walked in the room from outside and was talking to me. And so I was like, okay, who are you?
It said that
Character.
to you?
I said that to this whoever who
Oh.
just whispered to me, because I literally thought you were somebody else.
What
And
did
then
it
there's nobody
whisper?
else. Like, just, hey, I'm trying to get your attention. Like, hey, buddy.
Only Chris, who I call benevolent Batman, would be like, hey, like some
Hey,
smoky voiced hooded character. Hey. Anyway,
hey,
go ahead.
dude, what's up? And
Bruh.
bruh, come on, bruh, listen up. So I looked, and I'm like, oh wait, there's nobody here. It's me. This
Mhm.
is some of me here. And I was like, who are you? And the voice said, your soul. And then it said, it might be time to let me do some of the steering here. Would you like to hear what I think about all this? And I said, okay. And that really undertook an entire other exploration,
Mhm.
which is kind of the basis of this work. That was, I thought I was in touch with my soul, quote unquote, because I was on this heavy duty spiritual path. And it turned out my spiritual path had so disconnected me from my soul that I couldn't even recognize the voice of my soul and thought it was somebody else come in the room at first. And so that led to a whole other journey of who this aspect, the soul, for lack of a better word,
Mhm.
and it's my, whatever you want to say, characteristics, qualities, aspects, vision of the world, motivation, intentionality, feeling tone. And that was quite a journey, and that journey really became the basis of the interpretation, guidance, facilitation work.
Mhm. What I love about how you offer information is that just even what you said, I understand. If you go and look Chris up, you'll see he's had all these very specific pieces of spirituality and religion as a part of your like mosaic, so to speak. And yet when you just spoke that and you spoke from the soul place, it seemed to kind of rise up in like underneath all of it and kind of push it all out where it falls away. Like there's something that's so unique, simplified, custom built, sheds all of that stuff, sheds all of whether it's baggage or rhetoric or work, like the specificity of these silos of its Christianity or Catholicism or
Right.
this part, and then and yet there's this very distinct piece that is so unique. It's very stripped back, and it almost seems to, like you said, the cosmic joke.
Yeah.
Like to me, I think there's this element of going into a spiritual journey and feeling like you're going to become more, like more or something. And that what I've learned, and I think what you're alluding to, is the destructive nature, is a destructive experience or nature of the journey that does not feel divine. It doesn't feel like angelic, like it doesn't feel all of this shit that we're sold. And yet it is as holy as anything at the same time. Like there's a resonant element to it that has a worth it factor that wants us to hear it. And I think that is very soul language right there. Like that I think it takes, I don't know what it takes. For me, it took a whole lot of destruction and devastation and loss for me to tap into it and like accept it, because my defenses were down. Does that make sense? So that was my way in to realize there's this piece that is pragmatic and calm and knowing and totally fine with this. Like, and how is that possible? So that did intrigue me to listen. But then when I look outside and see people kind of chasing a spiritual this, that, or the other thing, and frolicking through fields and meditating and trying to meditate their, you know, their anxiety away or whatever it is. And I just go, I just don't, I can't see the two connecting. And I just go, oh dear, you know, like wait for it, a little bit. But so thank you for that, because I think it helps allow all those pieces and parts. They're not wronging them, but just an awareness of this, I don't want to say other, but it's like this other way in, or this other unyielding facet or aspect of self that's like ever present to this thing. And one thing you offered me in getting to know you and moving through some of your workshops and teachings and things like that is that there are many, like I walked into to your work still carrying a lot of, I am one thing. Like I'm one thing, I am Carrie Ann. And just very, I don't know how, words are going to suck during this podcast episode. Words are going to suck. And I'm a word lover, but I'm like, help me out, please. Whatever works with me, help me out. So there's this element of I am this one thing. And you started chipping away, helping me chip away at the cement that I built up around who or what I was, simply by introducing the fact that I am in relationship with pieces and parts of myself, but of everything. And I don't think you ever specifically say that, but that was my experience, was like, that's what I received working with you, is that I got to be more of a mosaic as opposed to a static picture, like a print, you know, like a flat print without any bumps or anything. It was like, I am this thing. And I found a lot of frustration in that, because if I was working with me as just that one image that I couldn't move, or like there were no other things, it was just flat, I was very frustrated with it. It wasn't working as a whole. And that was an angst I couldn't language, but I just felt it. And as soon as you gave permission to, like, you've done it on several occasions. One particular, when we did a session about creativity, and you had us close our eyes, and I was like, oh, creativity, man, creativity, geez, because I didn't realize I had issue with it. But I was like, God, it's a pain in my ass, because I have all these ideas. I'm an ideas person, right? And you were like, no, notice the dial, like where it connects with you, and notice the dial. And in my head, I was like, there's a dial? Like, oh my God, there's a dial? I felt so foolish, but also relieved and like pissed off all at the same time when I looked at my dial, you know. It was at 11. It was spinal tapped. Right. It was like
pranked.
Just that. And you speak of sovereignty. So I'd like to get into the soul stuff and like these pieces and parts, because I love metaphor, you love metaphor, and I want to like marry some of them together, or find out from you the ones that I get and like how they work with your model. But it really made me realize, like, oh, it was humbling is probably the best word, of like almost put me back in that seat of what you call sovereignty and what I resonate as sovereignty, to be back behind the wheel in a very humble, like lots of humility, almost with all of these like levers, but not overwhelming. It's just like, I have choice. I have relationship. I have perspective. I have some tools. I have breath work. I have therapy. I have many ways, and I have books. I have you. I have other coaches and practitioners to help me relate better to these pieces and parts. And it brought me back into a place of what I would call empowerment, and a perspective that made me feel less lost or being blown about by the wind, like a leaf of a tree, and back into the trunk experience of me as a whole being. So that printed picture of me kind of got burned up, and what was replaced with it was more of a stained glass window, which I'll talk to you in a minute. But with different various pieces, colors, parts. There's some letting in between, and that felt more like, like what a relief.
Yeah. No,
So thank you for that.
Oh, you're welcome. That's beautiful what you shared. Yeah, we are, I think, made up of many selves, many aspects or parts or members of the family internally, if you want to call them that. And they really run the gamut. So in terms of some helpful framing, I think, or modeling, just to not to have conceptual models, to have conceptual models. There's 1,001 of those that are not that interesting. But to do the very kind of thing you just shared, which was to actually have relief, to come back into a trust of your own being, to have a green light, to have multitudes, to live with ambiguity, to live with paradox, to be, I have this aspect, I also have this aspect. Sometimes they seem a little contradictory, but they can actually work together. And here are the parts that still need some work. Here's the parts that I'm afraid of, but they're there, and I need to figure out how to be friends with them, and and have it be a real sense of people talk about journeys all the time, but like an actual transformative journey. And to take up that journey from already feeling whole. You used both the wholeness at the end with the tree, but also holy at the beginning. And I like that kind of play on like holy, wholeness, kind of. So I do think it is a very reverent and sacred process that's full of lighthearted humor, that's full of sorrow and pathos, that's full of grief, that's full of lament, full of moments of being angry. So to me, my kind of like simple frame is imagine a long horizontal line. So a spectrum, a continuum. And on one side of that spectrum, we've got our most human selves and aspects, plus, minus, neutral, whatever, but all the different extremely personality-based aspects of ourselves. Then somewhere in the middle of the line, we would have the subtler aspects that we'd probably call the soul, who we are in our dreams, who we've come here to be, who we have coding to be, where we might have some areas that we're coming into this life with some areas that need some work.
Or want an opportunity to experience.
Plus ancestral stuff, the influences of our lineage. And then on the far side of that line, on the other side of the spectrum, would be the most spiritual or universal or unconditioned aspects of our being. Consciousness, awareness, unconditional love. And the normal model is usually, first of all, the normal model is usually made that line to be vertical. And so the whole idea in that setup, which is not what I'm talking about here, would be you start at the bottom and you're supposed to climb your way up the ladder, which is what I was doing in my 20s. You're supposed to leave behind the more individual aspects, both of the soul and the personality, in order to realize the oneness of spirit, and you leave the rest behind. Instead, I think if we flip that on its side, that's to me some of the demolition, was I had this vertical orientation and it got knocked over on its side. And instead of looking at which are the parts we like and which are the parts we don't like and which are the good ones and which are the bad ones and what do we keep and what do we get rid of, if instead we draw like a really big circle around this whole line and say, I'm all of the above, then we have set up an approach where we be human, soulful, and spiritual simultaneously. And that's counterintuitive, that's paradoxical. And that goes against a whole energy of shame, a very unconscious shame-based orientation, whether it has specifically religious implications or whether it has personal growth, like be fearless, be unafraid, Well,
like
then
to
you just,
overcome all of those things as though they're a problem.
yeah,
And then we have people literally embodying on a deep level that they're a problem, that the intention behind everything is I'm a problem to fix,
exactly.
not a being or an expression to experience, not just to be experienced, but to experience.
And to have choice and to have agency, like you said, and to create and to learn and to grow and go, oh, that didn't work out quite the way I thought it would, or that worked out in a way I would have never imagined. Isn't that
Yeah,
fascinating?
like we innocently compartmentalize things and create problems where there weren't problems.
Yeah.
Through what would be called seeking, and it's yeah, be mindful of who you're seeking with, and like teachers and all that sort of tricky shit.
Yeah.
But when you talk about that line, it reminds me of, so I speak to my people about what I get around soul. And I was telling them this metaphor for ages, and then I read something of yours recently and I was like, oh, it's like similar. And so I want to throw it over to you and see. My people are like, are you trying to test to see if like we're legit? Are you trying to like see if like no. I'm just gonna ask him. They're like, is he gonna like audit our metaphor? Here's the point. So here's how I described it, which is, so you use a sun-based metaphor, which I was like, oh, that's so weird and creepy, but I find that a lot like weird overlaps. I'm like, oh, that's weird. I was just saying this, but mine was a little bit different. So the sun being, so in my metaphor, it's like the sun being the source energy. The, you know, that would probably be where oneness is. The sun. And it has these rays of light that shine down and through what I was already talking, like a stained glass window. And to me, the sun is like source energy, and it shines light through all of the windows of this building. Doesn't have to be a church, but it's like this building with, and you know, well, in a church, if you look at stained glass windows, they depict a story, you know, something that's playing out. There's a character and there's usually a scene going on or whatever, and it's not all that dynamic. But what is dynamic is the pieces and parts and the different colors and how the light shines through that. And that those pieces and parts, to me, I think the glass itself as a whole feels like soul to me, like a very unique, kind of personalized, customized, if you will, like a thumbprint given from the big kahuna. Right. And the head honcho. Right. And so that's like my unique thumbprint. And the sun shines through each and every one of our unique thumbprints like that. And even the letting between those pieces and parts to me feel very ancestral, or the you know, kind of the things that connect and that are interwoven. And when it comes to things that are more conditioned or like darker or negative, you know, those perceived parts, to me, when I look at the stained glass window, I think of residue and dirt, you know, that those are simply parts of the windows I haven't tended to, or like the light isn't shining through as brightly as it could, but maybe that's not necessary in this life for me to figure that one piece out. You know, maybe that will stay forever dark in this life, but it becomes of interest to me to tune into various pieces and parts and how clear they feel or how distorted they are. And that the work, if we're talking about doing work in this life, which I don't love that term because I feel like it tunes into that problem bullshit, feeling like a problem, but like a process. So if there was a process, to me, that's the process of being curious and like walking with and working with these various pieces and parts to learn, almost become a student to those pieces and parts. And that's what sort of framed a lot of my work and like how I've reconciled what I do, you know, also with myself and with people that I work with. But you use a similar one. So I would love to hear your thoughts on that.
Yeah, it's beautiful. Spirit, as I'm using the term, and therefore spirituality or spiritual awakening or whatever, is recognition of the one sun, and there's one light of the one sun. And that's really on its plus sides, really beautiful. And that's what spiritual teaching is supposed to, I think, reveal for us. And you can use theological language and say we're all children of God, or something like that, but it's everyone is Buddha, expresses Buddha nature, or whatever version of it you want. But at its best, spiritual teaching is supposed to make us all equal. There's supposed to be a fundamental, not just with humans. I mean, this is the divine being a star, this is the divine being a tree, a tiger, whatever, plants. Like, there's a fundamental equality because there's one source and there's one light, one radiance of that one source. The limitation and the potential shadow side of a spiritual only approach, as reflected for myself in the I didn't even know the voice of my own soul, was that we can be so oriented to the universal, and we can be so oriented to the oneness, that we lose our diversity and we lose our distinction. We just kind of want to dissolve into the one light or whatever and disappear.
As
and
if that were the goal.
As if that were the goal.
Yeah.
And that typically shows up practically as a strong move towards social conformity and uniformity in a specific tradition. Everybody should shave their heads, or everybody should take different names, or eat only these kind of foods and don't eat those foods, and only act this way, and men have to do this and women have to do that, or whatever, right? I'm not picking on any one of them, it's across the board.
Yeah.
Because it's a translation or an interpretation of a genuine insight, which is equality and oneness. But then it's getting turned into, in order to reflect that oneness, we should all look the same or act the same or be the same. And that's where it goes kind of wonky.
Yeah, I mean, it's and the irony, is it irony? Whatever, you'll tell me. Is the irony is that the very thing that led us into that room is the humanity.
Of course.
Right? The want, the desire, and then even the conformity of just the shonky funniness of we shave our heads here. We wear robes here. Do it. Do it.
Yeah.
To belong. The very need to belong, which is so friggin' human.
Yeah.
Led us to seek to unravel it. You almost
but not, so it goes
but don't worry,
yeah,
so we're not going to undo the whole thing, just that part, just that really inconvenient part that's super human, the thing that brought you here. Anyway, we won't talk about it. Just sit down. We have things to do here.
Don't mention sex. Whatever you do,
we don't do that here.
So
yeah.
So as it comes to the stained glass, then, as soul, that is what actually mediates the ability of the light to hit Earth. And so for me, it was the soul journey was what allowed me to unite the spiritual elements, but also the really human elements in a not perfectly cohesive. We're all on a process, as you said, but to actually have it make sense, and not to be struggling against my own being, and just learn oh, this is how you can channel. And it will bring on the nice view there of a prism or a stained glass. And I love your image about the metal parts and the different colors and the mosaic. Is that as souls, each of us are radically singular, non-repeated, diverse expressions of the one light. And we're going to add our own coloration. For sure.
You just said something, if you're looking at my face, something major just hit when you were talking, and I was like, oh, that's hilarious. And so not how I've ever thought of it before, which was the very thing that brings the light, that one source stuff, to the planet, is these freaking bodies, this package. And all I saw was it kind of reminded me of the Wild Things, where the Wild Things are all those kind of I'm not joking.
Right.
In my head, I saw them all on the beach, stomping, and oh my God, guys. And we stomp our feet and we gnash our teeth and we show our claws. And And it was a romp, what do they call it? A rompus or a party
Yeah,
in the book?
yeah,
Oh, I'm covered in goosebumps. I'm onto something. And they're like, exactly. They're like, and in your silliness, all the levels of the humanity, like it's a there's celebration in the silliness. People I work with, they love alliteration. I love it. But it's
right.
like in that silliness, there's celebration, and it's shunky, and it's wild and weird. And like, so that, well, regardless of what you choose, like the permission that I guess I'm just getting on this level right now, it's like the permission just wants to actually connect everyone also.
Yeah.
Whatever you choose to do, you're nailing it.
Mm.
Like is kind of,
Mm.
and I just go, thank you. Like, I needed to hear that, but I think there's other people that might need to hear that too, to see that I'm not ever doing anything wrong. And how fundamental that is as a thread sometimes, that we think we're trying to excavate it and pull it out and pull this thread out, get this thread out. Like I feel like a magician pulling,
Right.
that colorful, it's like, get this out of me. And it's like, and yet it's rainbow colors. It's like,
Right.
and you're waiting for the black handkerchief and it never comes. You're like,
right.
and it just never comes. Yeah, you're never wrong. Like, so wow, like there's an unconditionality in the conditionedness. Oh, anyway, I don't mean to like circular talk. I hate that. But I do love it at the same time. Like it's annoying. It's almost so unconditional. You're like, but no, I must be wrong. Come on, tell me where I can be on the cross and just like,
there's aspects certainly that haven't been fully embraced into the family, or aspects that we've taken on that we think are part of our stained glass. We think they're part of our thumbprint, and maybe they're not actually. Maybe there was somebody else's thought about who we were supposed to be and who we should have been, and it's like, actually, that's not me.
I think that's one of the harder things to do in this gig, is to come across a part of yourself. And if you're if you're going by the book, because that's, I think our mind says, oh, if I come across it, it must be mine. It's like the empath's journey of, if I feel it, it must be my responsibility. And it's like you come across this piece of glass that's kind of sticking out and cutting people, and then you go, oh, and you're like, oh, I guess I'll just tolerate that. Like, I can't go anywhere. I cut everywhere and wherever I go, or like I end up feeling that soreness or hurt. And to actually go, yeah, no. Like,
still hasn't mine. Or this is again where it gets subtle. This is where we learn to develop the fluid nature, the intuition is back to the image of a stained glass. Like there might be some pieces that are chipped off that need to be relocated. Little pieces of the mosaic that have gotten a bit fractured, or maybe whole chunks that need, like, oh, there's a piece on the floor here. It might be a bit shardy. It might be a bit harsh to touch at first, but it might actually belong. It might be a piece of the puzzle that wants to come back home. So really being able to figure out like what parts that are arising are we in revulsion from, and that's because they look monstrous perhaps, but maybe they're really tender parts of our being that have been exiled. This would be what usually goes under the label of shadow work or something. Disowned aspects that have been rummaging around in the basement, or the child being raised by the wolves kind of feeling, and it might be a bit gnarly on the exterior, but turns out there's something really tender and beautiful in there that needs to be loved and brought back into the fold. Other parts, like you said, that we thought for a long time were us, but turned out they were somebody else's story.
Or you outgrow it, like. And I think there's such grief. I want to say the words like poignant, bittersweet, like a sweet sadness that people would define or interpret as wrong because it feels sad, or I'm doing something that feels counterintuitive, and yet there's a rightness to it. And like you said, as it arises, and that's sort of the model that I prefer. And yet I am definitely somebody that would have been like, let's dig, let's go, let's get her done.
Mm-hmm.
And now it's like, well, what, it's like the next step. And that I've learned over time through working with you and others and my own journey is that like to relax into the seat of the soul, so to speak.
Yeah.
Be on the ride fully. And like trust that whatever arises in my attention or my peripherals or something that matters.
Yep.
That's it. Like that's it. Like you're not going to miss anything. That which is meant to be worked on or like released or received, it will present itself. If you're paying attention, if you're open and you're willing, all will unfold and you'll be a part of it. It's not passive, but there's a passivity in terms of like not believing I need to do my way through this thing.
Yeah.
And there's a harmony there of like deepening learning, being held by something and receiving, and then like forwarding action and like taking action on something, like intentionally, like say having a session with you and saying, I've got this piece or this part, and it feels like deep sadness. And I really want to make sure I'm understanding all of it. Like I want to understand as much as I'm able to right now, like the humility around that, even like realizing like just right now, what can I learn or understand about it right now to let me and it walk and work together, and to have a dialogue, again, being in relationship. It's not just a thing about soul, but it's emotions, experiences. And to me that feels organic and more harmonious in terms of like we've got enough on our plates here. Like just I'm all over the place a little bit, but I understand there are people here that are just to be here. They're not really doing a whole lot. They don't need to. It's not a big deal. Like they're anchoring shit and they're just like, whatever. Like, and that's great. Like they're just, and then there's some people that are like, I'm here to like do donuts on the lawn of life. Yeehaw, motherfucker. You know, like that. And all belongs. And so wherever we are on that spectrum, like some people are not interested in what we're talking about, which is like, cool. And so here we are, and whoever's listening to this is clearly in the arena
in the stream
so like just giving people that either relief or release of like, oh, what if I, noticing in our own selves how we've maybe pushed the river a bit and tried to make something happen, as opposed to trusting that we're kind of this naturally unfolding story, like becoming. And to trust that. And I think that's something you help me do and I help others do, but like to hold that container.
Yeah. And I think when we've used this word sovereignty or the seat of the soul, or it really is about ultimately, while we have folks that we can look to who are, people who we really trust and whose perspectives are really important to us and we want to go for their counsel, which is always important. At the end of the day, the sovereign element is like you are the ruler of your own domain here, and that's why all these shoulds and supposed tos and old systems of like, this is how this is done and this is what the book says and this is what the guru says, or this is what so and so told us this many generations ago, so we always have to do it according to whatever. No, it's actually like we each, if we sit in the seat of our soul, we're gonna choose how we navigate this flow. We are, each of us, radically singular expressions of the one light, full of humanity, full of divinity, and everything in between. We're a whole fascinating mosaic and mashup. And at the end of the day, there's no way to give a script to say, you must do it like this, you must always do it like that. Like I can give general parameters, and that's why I also, back to the question about an interpreter, like I can offer best interpretations, but I always say to people, like, you're behind the wheel, I'm riding shotgun. If you ask me, I would take a right turn, but you're driving, so you'll decide whatever you want to do and you'll get to experience your choice. Like learning about, And this is where a part of when I'm working with people, that's something that I think is important. And this is, again, part of the interpretation element. Why we like metaphors and why we like maps, because we have to be able to translate energetic, soul level phenomena into stuff that our minds can at least start to wrap our brains around, which is as best we can do some maps, some stories, some metaphors that might be particularly relevant. But at the end of the day, as the saying goes, every person has to draw their own map.
What a pain in the ass. Like,
but it can be fun.
It can. That's the problem, though. And listen, that's the problem. This is so human. Like this one, that's the problem. That like I could fuck it up or I can make it good, and it's all on me. Like
right.
That's too much pressure, you know. And
right.
I deeply love
not from the perspective of the soul. Not
never. No.
It's like okay. It's the one that has the capacity. Now, when the smaller selves are being asked to do a job that it is not set up for, then it will feel heavy, then it will feel burdensome, then it will feel like, oh my God, that's too much. But if we're actually sitting in the captain's seat, if we're connected to the part of us that has this grace and has this wisdom, it'll feel like, well, this will be interesting. Let's see how this goes. Like,
so it's coming. So I'm like, are we going to talk about this or not? So here's another metaphor that is, I think, is so fun because it weaves in pop culture. I just love it. So I'm curious about your thoughts on this, because I think it's really helpful to hit it at a few different sides, because sometimes things just hit and you're like, yeah, there it is. So I was talking with one of my groups and this complete movie essentially came through and I was like, oh, and I saw it. And what I saw was the movie Titanic. You've seen it. Okay. I'm like, maybe we've hit the one person in the world. I know. But there's a classic scene where Rose is at the front, the very front of she is the maidenhead. The waves are practically, they're not, because it's like a skyscraper high, but essentially she's in the position of like chest out, arms open. And I'm like seeing this in my head and I'm like, yeah, okay, I think I know where this is going. And then Jack is in behind her and he's like got his arms around her and he's almost like encouraging her and whispering to her from behind. Now, the more I think about this and the elements of self, like small s self, the human self, the leaves on the tree, the very extremities of this experience, all this stuff, that's Rose. To me, that is so Rose, man. And think about everything in that movie. She's all about conformity, the rich, all the shoulds and the proper and the etiquette and the lessons and the where the fork goes. And she is this character in this movie that is like trying to do it all right. Yeah. Like chef's kiss of a metaphor, like in a movie form. And so she's freaking out. She's having all these ups and downs and she is like completely unstable in a lot of ways, right? Like as we feel as humans, like, thank you, Rose. And so there she is. And she's like, oh no, like, oh God, I'm scared. And Jack, think about him through the whole movie. He is like chill. He sits at this table of like, very fancy people, the rich and the, and he could give a rat's. He's like, and he's honest and he's very clear. Are you picking up what I'm putting down? I mean, it's so good. And he just holds this space of almost seeing it all and seeing the hilarity and the like farcical. Like he's like, y'all think you are the thing, but he's not arrogant. He's just humbled and this humility just sort of exudes. And then in this, he's like, I want to take you somewhere. And he takes her to the front of the ship and she's, oh, Jack, like, I'm freaked out. And he's like, close your eyes. Right? Hear my voice. He's right behind her and he gets her to put her arms up and she's like, so this is that moment to me that the soul as Jack, you can sense it behind you. You can feel it and you are still losing your shit out there. And then he's like, put your hands up and stretch them out. And you can see, and please rewatch this scene and see her hands moving in the air. And then she starts to feel safer because she's connected to that voice. And you can see her start to open up. And then he says, open your eyes. And she opens her eyes and okay, now I'm full body goosebumps over here. And she receives the moment. Because of all of that, she opened up and received the fullness of that moment with her arms wide open. And it is such a full experience. To me, that is such a great embodiment of the small human self, struggling self, the limited self in the body, and all the shonky personality, and like, even, you know, there's mental illness, and there's like all sorts of like ancestral stuff, genetic shit, like all that, like we're trying to figure it all out. And then there's this other piece in behind. What about this? Think about that. An urge, an instinct, an idea, like how it's moving things through things like creativity or our intuition, like these highways, these little byways that end up working together. And then there, to me, that is it. There's something just very like all encompassing in that. What would you add to that, or like completely like no? Like,
No,
you got it all wrong,
no.
Carrie Ann.
I just want to honor that. The so people will then, the question often then becomes like how one might get in touch with this seat or Jack version, you know, of yourself, or whatever metaphors we're using here. And again, ultimately, there's no ultimate prescription. At a certain point, your soul does the work. But there are things that are helpful enough to get the ball rolling. And so things like, if it's done well, like a reading about the nature from any system, no system is ever going to encapsulate the ultimate mystery and uniqueness of each soul. We're not looking to do that, but could we at least have some way to start to delineate some of the aspects of the stained glass window? Get some contours of the fingerprint, the soul print, you know, of a being. Just enough to get in the zone. Not to be fundamentalists about it, not to have to be like, this is the final ultimate, you know, like,
it's
but just like,
it's an opening.
Can we start doing some sketches and some draws about how that stained glass window looks for each being? And in ways that are sometimes bigger picture, and try to get just the rough outlines and contours. Also, you know, all the way to like more granular, like here's a very specific quality of your coding that maybe wants to live now at this point in your life. Maybe it's ripe.
It wants more of a place at the table.
Yeah.
Like if there was in the beginning of our conversation, there was almost a feeling like the UN, you know,
right. Right.
Different cultures, different lands, different traditions. And I even, you know, open up that perspective when working with people of like, if that part of you was a place, like just to get out of this very like linear thinking, to let just kind of throw the rules out the window and just trust whatever comes up and how it feels or senses is a helpful opening.
And it is and so things that, you know, it could be astrological. There are all kinds of various kinds of systems, and any system is going to have its strengths and limitations. Again, we don't need to be hung up on them, but it does help to give folks a beginning form of a map. The map is never the territory, but it's nice to have a good map if you're going somewhere. And in this case, the map is a journey to your own soul, to the domain of your own fundamental coding. And it's interesting terrain, to be sure. It can have all kinds of fascinating landscapes and climates, and
what would you,
various kind of
how would you introduce
creatures
that? Like,
one might encounter on the way. And you know,
is like, that something like, is there
a
quick drop-in or an exercise right now that would give people maybe an opening, but letting go, shaking your hands off of any expectations, if only to just even, because some people might be so far from this work, just even open up the consideration that you're something, like you're a culmination of pieces and parts.
Yeah, I mean, I think your image of the boardroom, or if you want it to be a jamboree or a party that you're hosting in your house, just look around who's at the table or who's at the party. you know, I feel like your UN boardroom thing, like they got their placards in front of their seats. Like, who's sitting at the table? Is it the voice of the reliable, rational individual who's analytic and thoughtful about matters and makes serious, sober decisions? I've got a seat at the table. Okay. Is it the, I just want to be free and I just want everybody to get along and love each other and I just want to accept everyone as they are? Then that one's got their plaque in front. Is it some aspirational version? Is some fantastical version? Is it a way out there, weird, wild, eccentric version? Like, who's all
Is there
around?
an anxious version that's
Is there an
freaking
anxious
out
or is
about?
there one in despair? Is there one
Yeah.
who's grief stricken?
Yeah.
Is
Hurting.
yeah, is there a young one who's, you know, very tender and innocent, going like, what is this all about? Is this okay to be here? And then which seats are empty? And the placards are there in front of the seat, but nobody's currently occupying that chair. And then if you want to push it even further, you can play like, which ones have the placards been taken off and are shoved underneath? Rage, anger, bitterness. Yeah, I don't know. Like,
They
for
weren't
everyone,
CC'd on the meeting. It was like, I really get the whole, like, we told them the meeting was on the 6th floor, not the 9th. So
yeah, they're somewhere else.
let's wrap this up before I find out.
Before they get here. The
yeah.
For everyone that we are overly identified as the good, reliable, sturdy, sober, whatever, socially approved of one, there's going to be its cousin. There's going to be its inverse character somewhere trying to break in or somewhere causing a ruckus elsewhere. And so it really is starting to appreciate the ones that are there and notice that each character has some unique offering to the whole. The voice of grief is a voice that needs to be listened to. He, she, they have something very important to add to the entire symphonic scenario going on here. And if we try to shut that voice out, if we try to drown it out, that voice will become insistent and will become dissonant and clangy in order to try to get attention, because it's not just been honored and accepted. You know, like you get your movies now. What's the kids movie? Inside Out, right? The whole movie,
absolutely. Such a good
everything goes wrong because they won't accept sadness. Right, that's the basic plot. Spoiler alert. but eventually,
you're safe.
Eventually, what happens? What's the resolution? The voice of sadness is finally accepted, and then there's that beautiful moment where like they each have the colored balls that are the color of their emotional voice, and the red ones are the angry and the whatever. And then there's the joy is kind of golden, and the sad is blue. And then they kind of join hands, and some of the memories become golden and blue simultaneously.
Like marbles.
Yeah. And that sweet sorrow and poignancy that you spoke to earlier is a deep hallmark of being willing to live this paradoxical approach of like, I'm going to seek to weave all these parts together into some mosaic or tapestry. It's going to be extremely beautiful and joyful and extremely sorrowful and pathos filled at the same time. And the more we get used to that as the feeling tone in small bites, you know, build up your tolerance, you know, acclimatize.
Like the practice of
taking it slowly,
the familiarity of it, just to weave it as a process that is like breathing. Like I always think of the word harmony, like all these different voices or instruments. No one, you know, a violin doesn't give a tuba a hard time.
Right. Exactly. They each have a purpose.
They
Each have a
understand. They
place.
understand
Yeah.
a tuba sounds like this, and a tuba brings value on this level. And there's a
Right.
respect that I appreciate about that
Yeah.
example that
Yeah.
applies as well, you know, and it's,
And if
of
the
course they
big
belong in the
and if
same
the
symphony.
yeah, and if the big kettle drum isn't allowed to play, then it'll really start banging. It will be a bit dissonant, like the boom, boom, boom on the back will like try to out, you know.
Linda over there on the big drum is like a problem, you know, and
Until we just like let that one be part of the let the
someone go
triangle
talk to her.
triangle when you need the triangle, right? Like, and based on that,
Yeah,
based on that image, we
good.
need a conductor.
There we go.
We need a conductor who's going to be the one. Otherwise, all these things might fight with each other, just try to drown each other out. Like, what is going to bring the harmonization? What is actually going to bring that kind of symphonic feel is a conductive or a conductor type. And that to me is the soul's place, is the conductor character.
I love that.
For the woodwinds, a little you all just a little for the moment. Okay, you up, you down, like everybody crescendo, like silence.
And we're all safe under the same umbrella, like, and we all belong. And
some of the instruments need to be tuned sometimes. They might be a little like, oh, we do the sound check. It's like, ooh.
And it's what's going on there. Like, it's not,
right.
oh, for Christ's sake, you know, it's
right.
just like.
Yeah. Oops, that one needs a little tune up. That's okay.
I'll be right back. Yeah. What I love is something that you just said, drop something else in. So when, I think this might tie things in. So when you're looking at the conductor as the soul, you know, orchestrating or helping to guide and facilitate or just hold the space and to be that mentor. That is what that is. But then what I love, so sometimes we can almost pit soul against human. Like, I'm definitely guilty of it in a way. Like, I'll speak to like soul level language or soul level information and how different that feels to human, you know, interpretation. And like, you know, even my face just kind of goes into this very tinny kind of looking around, trying to figure shit out. Right. And at the same time, to help open up access to this soul element, this soul wisdom, it's the human that's actually helping to make that happen. Like, so there's like this really, you talked about the spectrum, right? And like how they want to work together, how they don't want to be, you know, in opposition, and that wants to end. Like, and I just really appreciated that, because it was, we could just skip to the to what you were saying and be like, yeah, soul's conducting, and isn't that great? And then it's like, yeah, but don't forget who's helping make that connection happen. The willingness of the human self to open doors that it's like a little fucking freaked out of opening.
Yeah.
And like everything that comes out, bats, you know, dragons. I mean, like
beautiful colors and golden
like,
things that you'd have never imagined, and that you're in your being. Yeah, the whole spectrum of
risking it all. Like, I really feel a minute to be like,
yeah,
how real that is to the human part of us that's like, are you fucking kidding me? I'm not opening up that attic door. Like, I'm not. There are bats. Like, oh, like I don't. And it's like, oh, and but you know there's something there and behind, or like a mixed in with all of it that is of service to you, and like how brave that is.
Yeah.
How brave it is, and how hard it is. And that, again, that bittersweet sadness of like, I'm so sorry, Rose. Like, this is rough. Like, you got born into this thing, and like you feel lost, and like you're out on the edge of it. And yet there's this sensation or this knowing that is conducting all the pieces and saying, it'll be worth it. Like, but it'll be worth it. And that's all. When you spoke to the subtlety, when we first started working together, it really helped, because I remember being like, oh, that, Like, that's a thing. I thought,
Right.
intuition or working on this level would be like lightning bolt. It was all lightning bolts,
Yeah.
and it just isn't.
Yeah.
And so I think what you and I are here trying to do is also make this hella accessible
Yeah.
to drop down expectations about it. Isn't that it's actually more annoying because you kind of have to dumb it down or dull it down. No offense to whatever parts of me are like, hey, dumbing it down, you jerk. But like to actually listen in a weirder way and be like, oh, because when you're working with somebody or being facilitated, I think that's so helpful, right? Because then you're like, oh, that things are all the time. And then you would say to me, uh-huh, like,
Yeah.
yeah. Oh, I've been judging it the whole time.
Right. Right.
Oh, that's what's been going on. It's like,
Yeah.
and I just thought it was and it's like,
Yeah.
no, that's your soul, or that's your spirit, or that's your, and I was like, oh, geez, I thought it'd be a little sexier than that, or a little
There's a
something,
lot of instruments in this symphony,
a lot of
and
instruments. Yeah.
some of those instruments are highly unconditioned spiritual ones that might have a very harp quality and others might be your sithers or whatever funky wild, kids playing with the,
The Quasimodos.
the wood
You
blocks.
never want to talk to me. It's like, I do not actually.
So if we have this model of there are a lot of different aspects from the very subtlest to subtle to the most just every day, but all of them have an instrument and all of them have a role to play in the symphony of the being, with the soul sort of conducting, as it were, in this analogy. Then we really just start to appreciate, like, oh, here's a character who wants to come in and join in the music and has something to add, and we don't spend a lot of time becoming like, well, is this one of the human parts? Is this one of the spiritual parts? Is this one of the do we give this one the first chair? Do we put this one in this chair? Like, to just kind of like come on in, tune up, join in, and add your thing. And we get to find there's like, a multitude of potential aspects of us, and we've been focused mostly, which I think is the place to begin always, first in like the harmonization of our own internal symphony. But of course, we also interact with other beings. Usually most of us are not.
That's a whole other episode, Chris.
Right,
You're just
yeah.
gonna need to come back, because do you realize we've all just been on this side of the fence? That's all this wanted to cover. Do not bring other people into it.
Right.
It's hard enough managing this gong show of circus characters.
Yeah.
But it's wonderful as well. Like, I love the circus. Anyway, metaphors.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely.
Under the same tent.
Yeah. And it at least to just angle in that direction.
Yeah.
When we notice things like envy of other people's aspects, we may be touching into a part of ourselves that we haven't given space to let live in our being. Possibly. That's
where it gets interesting, really, because that's when we realize what mirrors we are, and mirrors in a way of like, no, it doesn't mean you're that. Like, how people have said that and run with it in such a destructive and diminishing way, that we're essentially all, in a way, triggers or inspirations. Call it what you want, but there's an opportunity. I always say, what's the opportunity here? There's always an opportunity, but what is it in this feeling, in this like person that's really pissing you off? What is it just wanting you to become aware of, as opposed to going in with the pitchforks and the knife, the burning, the fire and the pitchforks. Right. Get out.
Yeah. And you're right. I really agree with you that it's courageous. It's playful. It's one of my teachers. It's hilarious. It's tear soaked. It's confusing as hell. It's amazing. It's beautiful. It's all of the things. It's also really, to me, what reduces significantly is the suffering.
Yeah, it does.
But
That is what,
what grows is the tenderness.
yeah, thank
Like,
you for nailing that, because that is one thing that I have not realized I have been out of for a very long time, is suffering, which Buddhas would be like, what? Like, I'm sorry, you're not suffering? But I haven't. I've been scared many times. I'm scared now, like, and something just dropped in about like, you even know that you're nailing it when you just allow it to all like it to be a continuous, people are gonna like hearing that, a continuous experience of real and raw. And I don't know. We it's almost like we have this feeling of like the knowing is the destination. And it's like, not. It's like, actually,
it's navigating
it's
with a current that
navigating
you're
with
already on. Yeah.
already on, which is a culmination of knowing some stuff. I know some stuff,
Yeah.
but fuck, do I not know a lot of stuff? And I'm right out on the edge with Rose. I'm Rose.
Right.
Like Rose is part
Yeah.
on the boat. She's part not on the boat. Like her
Yeah.
hands and
Right.
torso are very much out in the stuff,
Yeah.
in the unknown. And to just be in that very real, and it is expansive, even in the freakouts. I mean,
Yeah.
it is. And to see that helps me be here. And I'm not like checking out or even close to it. I'm not interested in that. But at the same time, there's something that helps me maybe sit on that sovereign seat that you speak of, trusting it. Oh my God. Like, I'm a side-eyeing it right now,
Right. Totally.
like that,
Totally.
because, and that to me is very real. And I think I wish this was more sold to people, you know, as I'm about to embark on like the complete unknown. I don't know what this next chapter is going to bring. No home, no quote unquote home. Okay.
Yeah.
The conventional home.
Yeah.
Second time. So I'm not a newbie to it. And yet at the same time, there is still a very, very much a part of me that's like, what are we doing? Like, like, what are we doing? So maybe this will help tie us up, because we're good if we're doing, I want to keep these close to an hour, but like, what are we doing? And then, so that's very human and like out in the nothing, and I don't know. And then my knowing, call it my soul, is packing, and it hasn't stopped packing. So I'm still packing my shit up, and there's still very much a very real this going, what are we doing anyway? Why are we doing this? Like, wringing her hands, and all I know is I keep looking over, and knowing is just like, it's fine, we're just gonna be packing over here. You do what you need to do. We're packing though. And that shows me, well, if that part of me is still packing, then there must be something I just don't know yet. Damn it. Like, fine, it's that again. It's that again, meaning it's just very real, a very full, aware experience of like, I'm not supposed to. And what if that's a part of this thing?
Yeah.
And why it's important to have people in our lives that help facilitate this crazy talk, like you
And go
for
oh, yeah, that
others.
totally makes sense. Yeah, of course. That's
Own your
and
container.
yeah, and I think it's to me it is real. It has a more authentic, generative feel to it, and it, because it's not promising that conducting, like, there's still going to be some wrong notes. There's still going to be some dissonant, like, it's, no matter how perfectly harmonized, no matter how amazingly creative and wonderful, it's like there's still going to be some oopses. There's still going to be some stuff that goes a little sideways, and it's no guarantee. This approach is no guarantee that
No guarantee.
you live on the you live on the mountain and being in like great spiritual, that won't happen.
Like,
and also that you're like, you'll live your best life ever, and the roses and duckies and no, it's like you get to live in devotion to that flow,
and how that flow doesn't try to bypass really hard shit. Like, oopsies. When you said oopsies, I thought that was funny, because my 13-year-old's really into, like, when something really bad happens, he goes, oopsie, and like mocking it, because I think it's just a hilarious kind of very Golden Girls thing to say. And but there's some real rubber hits the road, devastating loss, and like, why you know, why that, and like that reverence of an experience. And so talk about a full spectrum. So it's like no joke and like joke.
Yeah. My
But
one of my teachers used to say, and they quote this one a lot because it sat with me for so many years, is you just get more of everything this way. This is like the happiness will be way happier and full of so much more joy. And the sadness is going to pierce right through you just that much cleaner. It'll move through faster, but it'll be
my ears getting pierced with like
right. Like, enjoy
great.
this. Ooh, that was chilly. The anger will be fierier.
Holier, may I add.
Yeah, it'll just be more of all of the above. If we've had this view that like happiness is the good stuff, and
maybe less scary, if I could offer anything, maybe less scary in a way, like
less suffering.
Yeah, there it is again. It is. After my dad died, I noticed that, because we had already worked together for many years, and I've done a lot of this opening up to myself. You know, I like that better than working on. I've done a lot of opening up to myself, and that helped me navigate it in a way that I cannot. Part of me is just like, wow. On the surface, it would look like, boy, you're really over that. No. I just received it fully and still do. And I'm just open to whatever else it wants to continue to teach me. As traumatic and devastating as it was, did not want to repeat it. Not that day. No thanks. And I didn't. There's an element of not resisting anything, that, not to be damaging to myself, but if it's here, well, who the hell am I to argue with it in a way? So keeping one eye open and one eye kind of like I'm open to it. What do you want to say? You know, like, while you're here, if you have anything to say, like, you know, just being like, be gentle, please. This is killing. This is already hard enough. But like, if there was something here for me, speak now, please. Like, I don't know, like just that. So if it's humility or just surrendering to it, but not in a way that I lose anything, in a way that I'm opening up to it. To be a student or a teacher, not here to waste anything, I guess.
And we still get to be back to the importance of the human self, or the human selves, you know, the family.
Such an important filter.
We're still going to be completely human in this thing.
It's such an important filter. Like, and we spend so much time judging it. God, I hope whoever's listening really gets this, because it's really soft on me right now. Like in myself. We really do. I really do that still. And I don't think it's like, well, no, I won't. You know, it doesn't work like that. But but apparently this one moment where it drops down and touches on my heart and goes, like we do that. And it's very unconditional, actually. It's like, it's fine, we're good. Like, we get it. That's how we're designed. But to help break that up a little bit and be in better relationship with and open up to the various pieces and parts. Well, if there were anything, I mean, I feel like there's many things we've already said that feels really important that you wish people understood, that's on your heart right now, that you would want to offer anyone listening before we sign off. What might that be right now?
I think following on what we were just saying there is like honoring and really learning to love and befriend all these parts, from the most spiritual to the most human and everything in between. When they're honored, when they're appreciated, they can give their gifts. If they've been in the shadows, they get to come home, and then they turn from their shadowy version to their gifted version. If they're parts that we've always identified with, they still get to be, you know, they still have to get to have a value. If they're like protective and, you know, I need to be rational and I need to be reasonable. It's like, great, be rational and be reasonable. We need some street smarts while doing this whole thing. It's great. They can start to be they lighten up a little bit.
Mm.
We get some space, healthy space and differentiation, but they can still have a place. We're not trying to, like, in the old model, like, here's the ones who I am, and then there's all these characters that are in the shadows, and then, oh no, I'm really the characters in the shadow. And I'm like, no, just be all the above. And these parts just want to be loved, and they just want to be appreciated and allowed to do their thing and be freed up from having to do all the other things. They just want to, like, the voice of creativity just wants to be your creativity. It doesn't want to be responsible. It doesn't want to, like, somebody else can handle that. This is my department.
Yeah.
I'll do my thing. They'll handle the other person.
And like what that gives us.
Yeah.
Each part feels so sovereign in itself.
Yeah.
When there's that opening and building a relationship with, like, when you were talking, all I saw was like this, remind me of The Outsiders. I'm totally dating myself here, but it's a good movie. Any millennials are like, what's that? It's amazing. Tom Cruise is one of his first movies. He's a baby. Anyway, but like this posse or a gang, you know, each one has their own unique value, and like, and you get to know them variously at various stages, and you develop a relationship and an understanding, and through that you become a cohesive, like a more united front. And it doesn't mean pieces and parts of the gang or the posse won't fall or stumble or have issue, but it means the rest of the gang shows up. Like, the more you practice this, the more, I call it finding wholeness from the whole mess. And it's like a collection, like when you talk about soul interpretation, there's almost soul retrieval work in what we do, which is like gathering pieces and parts, bringing them into the fold, rallying or creating a sense of moreness or wholeness, or sense of capital S self, not the just tiny human part on the outside, but like a sovereign, you call it sovereign self, right? Yeah. That they show up, and you've got more available in terms of inner resources, you know, to apply a bomb, or to listen, or to help bolster up, or rest, let that part rest, or like, and to trust your inner wisdom as a lot of moving pieces and parts without that being a problem. Yeah. Is what I think you just. Yeah. Oh, thank you.
Oh, you're so welcome. Thank you for having me and giving me, and this is such an amazing thing that you're doing, and it'll be such a great gift for folks who are listening, and folks get to come on and talk. It's a gift for me too. So yeah.
Well, will you come back another time?
Oh, of course.
We would love to have you, because I have
put up the benevolent bat signal, and
he pulls his hoodie up. The dark novel. Anyway, sorry.
Yes.
Love it. No, thank you so much. And because I have a feeling this is going to stir up a lot of WTFs, is what I call them. They're neither good nor bad, but they're a bit of a what the fuck? Like, what?
And just have a moment with those, like the curiosity. Those are good little pattern interrupts.
Those are the things that arise. It's like, it wouldn't be coming up if it wasn't important or matter. So making those pieces and parts matter. Where can people find you? And because you have a beautiful newsletter that just drops such such beautiful guidance, and even, you know, meditations and things like that. My writings, I'm starting to do some audios layered in, are on my Substack account. So that's cdierkes.substack, or we can just link to it. But the link will be there. Liquid Love, that's the Substack, and then my website is mostly for folks to check out some of what I offer, and that's chrisdierkes.com. But yeah, the writings on the Substack and the audios and stuff is where we go into more detail around the themes we covered today. I can't wait for people to hear this. And I'm curious about what it brings up. And so this episode, like all episodes, are going to be posted in the Radical Acceptance group on Facebook. And we'll keep the conversation going there. Just thank you. Oh. Just thank you. You're welcome. It's always an honor. You're such an amazing being. It's so great to spend time together. Thank you, Fab. I really appreciate that. I love you. And we'll see you again. Thank you, everybody, for listening. Bye, everybody. We'll see you in the group. Bye.